Hey, Clayton, in Matthew's genealogy, it does the whole 14 generation thing. On the podcast and in my study Bible notes, it explains that it might not be exactly 14 generations, but condensed. Does that mean there are more generations, say, between Boaz and King David than it looks like? Or do we know what some of those generations were for sure? How can we know if it is exact and precise or it's been changed? This is a question that comes up once you learn how ancient genealogies worked. We talked about this in the episode on Matthew chapter 1 that begins with a genealogy of Jesus. And we talked about how genealogies are not the way we use genealogies, like a family tree that's supposed to precisely track every single generation, but they're a form of art. They're not really journalism. They're more of a way of characterizing the person you're telling a story about. Now, this doesn't mean that they're false or fictional. They're just doing something different with their genealogies than we do in our culture. These are crafted. They are choosing which generations to include or exclude to make a point about this family or the individual that they're going to tell a story about. So in Matthew's genealogy, it's crafted specifically to have 14 generations between Abraham and David, 14 generations between David and the exile, and 14 generations from the exile to the Messiah, Jesus. And so you see that, and it's clearly symbolic numbers, right? It's 3 double sevens, which in that context would have said, this is something really, really special. Now, it seems pretty convenient that it just happened to work out that way, but it turns out we know if you actually look at the other genealogies we have in the Old Testament that Matthew skipped some, right? If you go to 1 Chronicles chapter 3, there are more names in the generations that are listed there than there are in Matthew chapter 1. Now, it's clear that Matthew skipped some so that he could get the right numbers. What we don't know is why he excluded the names that he did. Some of those names people have theories about. They're interesting. They say, he excluded this king or this set of 3 kings and that sort of thing. And people have their theories, but we don't know for sure why he kept out the ones that he did. But the only reason we know that he did is because we have another genealogy in another place. And so the question is, well, what about the genealogies where we only have one version? How do we know if there are genealogies missing in those and that they weren't crafted? The honest answer is we don't know. We don't know if there are genealogies that the author knew about but didn't include in some of the ones that we have in other places in the Bible. The only time we know is if we've got multiple versions of the same person's genealogy. They could be skipping some of those. Now, people worry about that and they say, well, we don't have all the information. How do we know? The honest answer is we don't necessarily need to know. Right? God doesn't promise to say, I'm going to give you all the information that you might be curious about. He says, I want to give you the information you need. And what our job is to learn how to experience and interpret that in the way that he wanted us to say, what was he saying and how did he use the human author to say it and help us to get the point that he's trying to make, even if we're curious about some of the other things.
Thanks for listening. If you've got your own questions, email questions@BibleSavvy.com. Like and subscribe to catch our regular episodes every Monday on the Bible Savvy Podcast.